Right. This is a get well message for Faye that we hope you're back on your feet soon and feeling good. But we're going to do what we can today, and then we're going to share this. I was just describing to Juan and to Buki that we are working on creating a way for you to access the Cardano node remotely. And we're almost there with the details of how to do that in just a safe and efficient way. Because just reviewing what we talked about last time, basically, you know, we still don't have the bandwidth where you are to download the entire ledger or the entire Cardano database, right? So we have to find a solution that doesn't require you to download that entire, right? It's several gigabytes. I know it's more than 4 gigabytes. It might be more than 5 at this point. But you don't want to download 5 gigabytes worth of the blockchain over a mobile phone connection. So we're looking for a way to have you access the node and start, you know, interacting with it. And this really is what Dandelion provides. Now, there's a whole bunch of different endpoints, a bunch of different APIs for interacting with Cardano. And we just agreed before I pressed record that it can be overwhelming to learn all of them at once. So we're going to just try to take it one at a time. And we're going to start learning how to use these endpoints and gradually level up our skills until we're building real things. So let me share my screen. Go over here. Okay, so what I have here, this is actually a metadata transaction that I posted to the blockchain just yesterday. And it needs, I think the copy I made of it looked like this. We need brackets around the whole thing. So let's just look at the format of metadata for a second. Okay. Metadata is a JSON object, right? I can have any file name I want, .json. And inside the file, I have curly brackets, which represent an object. And inside of that object, I have one key right here. This represents the metadata key on the blockchain. And then at this key, there is an object that can consist of all sorts of different things: text, numbers, encoded byte strings, or hashed strings. And so what you see here is I have an object that has a bunch of different key value pairs. The title is this. We have a start date and an end date, just a date as a string, right? More strings, key value pairs, some numbers, and then a message. And basically the way this works is that if you're adding strings to metadata, then the longest that string can be is 64 characters. So if you want to put text that's longer than 64 characters, what you have to do is split it up into an array of strings, right? Square brackets here representing an array. What's inside that array is a bunch of strings, each with maximum length 64 characters.
Mr. James?
Yeah.
So is it just particular to metadata or a JSON file in general? I mean, the length of the characters.
Perfect. Yeah, that's unique to Cardano transaction metadata.
Oh, okay.
Great question. Yeah, so a JSON file, you could have a string as long as you want. You could have a whole paragraph, okay? But on the Cardano chain, the maximum string length you can place is 64 characters. And that's why we have this array. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I wanted to pause right there after giving you that overview.
I really like the fact that you are taking us through I know we've talked about this before, a JSON file and the key value pairs, but I'm beginning to understand how everything is coming together as regards metadata transaction in itself.
Oh, Buki, I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah, I'm still understanding it little by little. So I'm glad that you're understanding it better, and I'm I'm probably explaining it a little bit more clearly than last time too. So good to be doing this together. All
Okay,
right.
Mr. James, thanks.
You bet, you bet. Okay, so let me show you this. There's a few different ways we can look at metadata on the chain. So first of all, I want to talk about this key right here for a second. Now, there's different ways to look at this. I've made a starter kit about this before. This is Ola made this cent stake pool tool, okay? And what we can do is we can go into transaction data, and all he's doing is drawing on all the different sorts of endpoints for interacting with the chain to make some really cool tools. And there's a lot of different ways you can now interact with this information. And I recommend you play around with this just by browsing this site right here. And I'll put this in the chat. Just by browsing this site, I've learned a lot about how metadata works. Oh yeah, Juan, I'm seeing your question. Yeah, let's expand on this key part right now. Okay, so what you can see here is one way that the data is organized is by metadata key, right? We can also look at it by epoch. There's been 404 transactions with metadata attached in just the last, whatever, like 12 or 15 hours since the new epoch started. You can see that in history, there's been 102,000 transactions with metadata, and we could browse those directly if I click this one. Okay. Epoch 261, working backwards, we can look at it through time. But what I really want to focus on today is this one, where it's organized by key. And this is what this key right here represents. Okay. This tells the blockchain basically, okay, file this information away here. And if I look down the list for key 101, here it is. You can see that 7 transactions have used that key so far. And if I click into here, I can see that in Epoch 260, which just ended yesterday, here is the JSON object that I posted here. Now notice the object that you see here, right, is just this part. Does that part make sense? Okay. At this key is this object. And there's that object. Now, if you're watching closely, you can see that the order of these key value pairs here is different than the way I originally had it. That's a characteristic of JSON. Okay. Let me pause there. Any questions so far? Ah, nice. Do you know what?
Mr. James?
Yeah, go ahead, Buki.
I guess we can just create any random metadata key by just assigning it to the JSON file. Is that what you're saying?
You can
For
type,
example,
yeah.
if there wasn't key 101, by just typing this in a JSON file, it reflects when you actually post it to the blockchain. Am I correct?
It affects where you post it to the blockchain. This is kind of
Okay.
a location, right? So you've got the when by epoch, and you can also see the time that this was posted. Okay, this is in UTC time. Okay, so we've got
Okay.
time represented by epochs, and right, once something is up, epoch 260 is now over forever, and now it's the beginning of epoch 261 today. So you can see this is a really nice way of organizing data and saying, okay, that's it, right? This stuff that happened 6 epochs ago, and an epoch is 5 days in length. So here's a bunch of data that was posted 30 days ago and maybe 40 days ago or so. But the key represents more of a location. And some people are already using these keys for specific purposes. For example, I happen to know that key 100 is where, was this epoch? This is where the voting results for Catalyst Fund 2 were posted. And so you can see that Anthony from IOHK posted this information about each of the Catalyst proposals that got enough votes. I know, for example, that at key 721, let's go take a look. And the number 721 is just a reference to ERC 721 tokens on Ethereum, right? And look, wow, there's a lot of metadata transactions there, right? It's arbitrary to choose your number. You can choose whatever number you want. But because it's kind of got this kind of historical significance on Ethereum, 721 is useful. And if I go here, I can see people are making NFTs and putting links to their NFTs here. Okay. I forget which epoch, right? All sorts of people are doing all sorts of stuff, right? This is where, if I could scroll through and find it, this is where you would find the space buds, for example. Okay, so people are putting links up to all this, and you can see that, yeah, Juan shares this. This is the IPFS file, and this is the pool PM file. So we've got an asset number, but we need a, so I'm not sure. I actually haven't, Roberto told me that this happened, but I haven't seen exactly what metadata he attached to it. Maybe I can look at this. So yeah, let's look at this a different way now. Let's go take this over to Cardano Explorer. If I put that transaction ID here, let's see what we see. Okay, yeah, that's some other kind of hash. So I got to catch up with him to learn exactly what he did here. Let me see, what if I type the asset name? Here, let me show you this a different way. So I have, right, I showed you one way that we can look at metadata is through third-party tools like Stakepool Central. But also I can go directly to the Cardano Blockchain Explorer. This is hosted at cardano.org. And I can find the transaction that was posted, right? You can see 15 hours ago, Epic 260. Okay. And you'll see down here, unmoderated content, transaction metadata is not moderated, right? So a little warning, but we can show it. And here again is precisely the same metadata I was just showing you. Okay. And there's other sites where you can look at this as well. I could go over to
Full PM will show it as well.
Cardano scan, and I could put this transaction here, and I can see the metadata this way as well, right? This one shows it kind of as a string, and you'll notice that this is presented in a different order, but here we see the key and we see the information. Let me pause there for questions. What are y'all thinking about?
Can we access pull PM, pull that PM to see if it shows there? Because I think that was the one we used. Pull PM, right?
Let me try. So here, copy this maybe to Cardano scan and see what we get. Ah, there it is. Yep. So you have a minting, you have a transaction, the minting transaction. Okay. And somebody has one of those tokens. Who has that token? Let's see here.
That could be Jimbo Labs.
All right, so there's no metadata attached to that transaction. How about this one? Here it is. Okay. So there it is. Okay, so he also used key 721. Here's a link to the image. The location, this is just the same hash that you see here for IPNS. A name, a hash, and a type. And there you have it. So let's go back to blockchain intelligence at key 721 late yesterday. This will be like right near the end of that epic, I think. Oh yeah, that was in the morning. Okay, so if I go to key 721 to the epic that ended yesterday, oh, we've got all sorts of Cardano kids were being printed. So we're probably gonna have to scroll pretty far here. Here, let me just search and set instead TTM. Let's just search for that. There it is, okay. And a link to the image that Juan had as his background. Questions?
This is awesome. I think it's awesome. Yes.
Kind of, we're starting to put some puzzle pieces together, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so I want to show you something. I'm going to show you one of the little toys that we built in the Gimbal Labs playground. And then I'm going to challenge you, at least Buki and Faye, to try to do this on their own. And Juan, if you have a site, you can also use this same logic. But let's just take a look at this together. So what we did in Gimbal Labs, in our playground, this is where we're just tinkering. There's a lot more that's going to start showing up here soon. But I just want to show you, there's a few resources here. You can review what JSON is, and I put up a starter kit here, okay? But I just want to show you that I built, you know, a very basic copy of what's much better done here, okay? So this is, I think of Blockchain Central as the gold standard for browsing metadata, okay? And all I did here is I said, all right, I just want to show how that happens. So we've got metadata, we've got all these keys. If I go to key 101, I can see that there are a total of 7 transactions with this key. What's the most recent one? Here it is. This is that same metadata I was just showing you. Okay. all this is doing is showing the most recent thing, right? I could show more, but I just wanted to keep it simple. And I have the code to show how many transactions there are, which key it was, and what's the content of that most recent metadata. We can confirm this over here. If I search by key, I can see that key 100, has 4 transactions. Like we just saw, key 101 has 7 transactions. 7. Let's just look at one more. Key 105 has 5. Key 105 has 5. Okay. Now, all of this is done with dynamic routes in Next.js. Okay. So the ABCD website is now live and it's built on Next.js. So I can show you a bit about how I used dynamic routes here just to build this little toy. Okay.
That's exciting. I'm so excited about
Hey, good. Oh, I'm so glad you're with me.
it.
All right, so the Gimbal Labs website is public. It's in this GitLab repository. I'll put the link in the chat and I welcome you to take a look at this for reference anytime. Okay. Now remember about Next that everything is pages. All the routes are created by pages. So let's look at this route. This route says gimballabs.com/playground/metadata/postgres and then a number. And this number here is dynamic, right? That number there comes from whatever metadata key I click on. And so this is dynamic routes in Next.js. And even if I find one of these big numbers, you can see that's the dynamic route that's used here.
Mr. James?
Yeah.
What I can still recall from routing was to Next.js makes routing really easy as to just creating a file. It originally, like it creates a route for you. But when it comes to dynamic routing, you specify it with the use of square brackets. I don't know if I'm still correct.
Yeah, you just said it right. And I want to show you what
Okay.
that looks like now. Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is
Okay.
such a fun way to play with dynamic routes, right? Because now we have this distributed ledger, all the metadata is up there, right? And that gives us some fun data to try to play with. So let's first look at those routes. What did we say? It was playground, metadata, postgres. Playground, metadata, postgres. And now you see 2 files. You see an index, which is what you're going to see when I go to this route here, right, where it just ends postgres/nothing. This is the index. And then we have the dynamic routes, like Buki just said, square brackets. And the name inside of these square brackets can be whatever you want, right? That becomes a variable that we can then use. So let's look at both of these files. In the index, this should look mostly familiar. I'm importing links and I've got my type, right? Just like you have at ABCD. I'm going to skip over this stuff for just a moment and come back to it, but let me scroll down. Right. This is not a very long page, right? Because it's dynamically rendered. So there's a ton of content here, right? There's a box here for every metadata key that's ever been used, but it didn't take much code to make this happen. So let's just look at this for one moment. We have an enclosing div with some padding, no big deal. Then we've got a title heading that says playground metadata. That's right here, right? and it's styled from my type file, and I'm exporting all these styles, right? So title heading 1 is arbitrary. It's just a name for a custom component. Then underneath that title, we have one div, and this uses some Tailwind. This div uses the grid class. You can see it is responsive. So on a medium screen, there are 4 columns. On a large screen, there are 7 columns. There's a gap of 4 in between the rows and the columns. So let's look at that. What I should see here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across, but this is responsive. So if I make it smaller, at the medium break point, it drops to 4 columns. Okay, so we're using dynamic routes just like we've used before. That's what we see here. Yeah, I made the text a little bigger, and I made some padding above, just basically above the entire enclosing div. So that PT6 represents this little extra white space right here. The gap 4 is what makes this white space and this white space appear. All right, so what's inside of that? Well, inside of that, we map an array. What array do we map? Well, this is where the logic up above comes from. We're mapping data, which was passed to this this exported function, right, as a parameter. And then we're taking each item in data and we're mapping it to a link. Where does the link go? It goes to playground/metadata/postgres/dynamic number. Okay, so this right here is the logic that's creating the dynamic number at the end of the route. And then inside of that link, we have a div. It's just a little box, right? It's blue 400. When you hover it, it gets darker. Let's just make sure we see that. Light blue, when I hover, it gets darker. Okay. And where does it go? Well, it says the number of the metadatum, right? So the number it's printing inside of the box is actually coming from the exact same place as the route itself, x.metadatum. Okay, so where does x come from? Well, x is just, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm a bit confused. In every React file or project that we create, we have the app.js and we have this file now. What logic does the app.js solve, and what logic does this particular file solve? Because I'm a bit confused.
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay, yeah, let me back up. That's a great question. So I'm going to go back to pages. Here's my app.js. There's not much in that. Okay. Well, what is it? It's my layout, and then we're passing it whatever components. All right, so now let's look at layout for a minute, right? My app.js is super minimal. So what's layout? Well, layout comes from components. Let's take a look at that. So it's actually not going to be in here. Oh, and actually, yeah, I should be showing you index.js, but let's come back to that in just a minute, okay? So app.js has the layout, which is a component. Okay, layouts, layout. Layout is pretty simple. It just imports the nav and the footer, right? Top and bottom. It puts the nav on top. It puts the footer on the bottom, and then it puts a main class in between. No big deal. Okay. So then it's a matter of, all right, where is that internal stuff coming from? And that is what we see if we go to pages and then index.js. Okay. So here's our home screen. Now there's all sorts of stuff here. Okay. Now Next is handling this for us. Basically, the way Next is set up, whatever route you go to, it's going to render that component inside of our basic layout, right? So in between the header and the footer, it's going to render whatever we pass it. And Next is taking care of that under the hood. So if I'm at the home page, I see the same header and footer, and then I see the stuff that's in index.js inside. But if I go to about, then I see, right, the same header, the same footer, and the about / index.js inside. About has one file in it called index.js. And so this is all the stuff I see in between there. So the long story short, yep, go ahead.
If I understand everything you just said correctly, it seems the app.js just gives a format that specifies that there should be a header and a footer, and the content in between the header and footer is kind of specified in the index.js. Am I getting it right? I don't know.
The content of this component right here is taken care of by all of the routing that Next.js does for us under the hood.
Okay.
There's all sorts of stuff we don't see. And remember, this one of the reasons we're using Next.js is because it makes it so easy to create routes. All we have to do is just add either files or directories, and boom, now we have routes, right? The way that happens is under the hood. It's hidden from us in the Next.js code itself, right? And what it does in the end is, it just passes this content. And we don't have to have the layout tab. I could just get rid of layout and only send one component to app.js, and that would be fine. I just wouldn't have that consistent style from page to page, right? Or I could just, instead of using layout here, I could just make this a regular div, and I could put a nav above the component and a footer below it, and that would have pretty much the same effect, right? I just chose to separate the code a little bit.
Okay, so the component is like the dynamic content for each page.
This is where this is the magic. Yeah, this is doing the magic of Next for us and making our job much easier as developers.
Okay, so what does the index.js, what that file, what does it specify then?
Index.js specifies what you should see as the default in each directory. Okay, so if you just go to gimbalabs.com, the first thing it looks for is index.js. Now, one way I could make gimbalabs.com/about, and you've used this already at ABCD, right? Is I could just make a file called about.js right here. Okay, that would have exactly the same effect as what we currently have here. Just make about.js in the top directory. What I did instead is I made a new directory called about, and I made a separate file with the same name, index.js. So what this does is it says, okay, when the browser goes to this route, look for the index.js file in this directory. Or if you go to Playground, for example, Playground, now either look for the playground.js file here, Oops, I don't see that. I don't see playground.js. Ah, but I do see a folder called playground. So go there and look for the index. Okay, so index is just the default component that the browser, basically that our routes look for indexed to render that first. And you can see I have another index at this even deeper route. I just keep using index.js inside of folders so I can use those folders as my routes. And I find this helps
Okay.
me stay organized.
Okay, so I think the app.js is kind of it kind of governs the entire project, whereas you could use the index.js for specific subfolders within a project, I guess.
Right.
That's the way I'm trying to understand it.
Yeah, and this top, right, at the top level, app.js is a really short file, right? My layout file is a very short file. But this index.js, which serves as the home page, this is a long file. It's got all sorts of stuff in it because this is where I'm actually rendering all the things you see on this page.
Okay.
Okay. Ooh, I'm really glad and Faye, I want to say hi to Faye right now. I hope that this video is making sense so far. And Buki, thanks for these questions. I think it's really good that we're getting some clarity about this.
Okay. So this is it's just that when I was designing the about.js, I didn't have to go through index.js. I had just created an about.js files and I created all my designs there. So now seeing your own pattern, I'm just trying to see, okay, if the computer was to go through a certain route, it either checks if there's an exact file or checks for the index.js under that folder. I'm trying to piece together everything so I have better understanding of how Next works, I guess.
So yeah, when I first start building a site, I usually just make a bunch of pages, just like you're saying with about.js. And you can still see I have an experiments page here that I made 2 months ago, right? And haven't touched it since then. A lot of this other stuff has been updated more recently. But yeah, like when I just want to put something together really quickly, I make a bunch of .js files. But then as the project expands and I decide I want to get organized, this pattern really comes in handy. And it's no problem to take an existing JS file, create a folder with the same name, drop that file into that folder, and then change the name of that file, right? So with learn.js, let's say, okay, if I wanted to change this into a more organized route, I would make a new file called learn. I would drag and drop learn.js into my learn folder. And then I would rename this file as index.js once it was in that folder and it wasn't going to conflict with this one, right? Now, after I did that, the one thing I would have to fix would be my imports, because this file would now be one level deeper in the folder structure. I would just have to add another dot slash in front of this and another dot slash here, just to represent going backwards one more folder. And if you forget to do that, obviously you'll see some errors that it can't find these imports, right? So that I often forget to do that step, and then I get the error. I'm like, oh, right, I have to fix those routes right there.
Yeah, I'm so happy you spoke about this dot slash because I was always trying to imagine it. So if I'm to go a step further into a specific folder, I should just put a dot slash. Is that the norm?
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
specific dot, one dot or two dot slash?
So one dot, you only use one dot when you want to say this folder. In this folder, find this, right?
Okay.
Two dots means go up one level in the folder hierarchy, right?
Up
Go
one level.
up one level. Yeah, so this dot dot right here is the same thing as saying, okay, we know that we're in the folder called pages right now. This dot dot says, all right, go up out of pages into Gimbal Labs, then look for a folder called components, and then look for a file called type. So we're in pages, go up one layer to Gimbal Labs, look for a folder called components, and there you'll find a file called type. And that's where our imports are coming from. Watch this. Now, if I go to pages and I go deeper into my routes, playground, metadata, Postgres, then index, look at how many dot dot slashes there are here. Because I have to go backwards to metadata, right? We're in Postgres. This dot dot says go backwards to metadata. Then this one says go backwards to playground. Then this one says go backwards to pages. And finally, this one says go backwards to Gimbal Labs. And once you do all of that, once you get all the way up to here, then once again, look for components and look for type.
Okay. So I'm beginning to understand a whole lot of things. Thank you, Mr. James.
Oh, Buki, it's my pleasure. Thanks for staying with me.
I'm so sorry for cutting you short. These two concepts have always been an issue for me, so I'm just happy to be able to gain some clarity on them now.
Oh, my friend. No, you asked such good questions and it's never a cutoff. Thank you. I'm really glad we're here.
Thank you.
Okay, so you ready for a challenge?
Yes.
All right, so here it comes, okay? So now I showed you how this basically the JSX down here, right? The HTML and JavaScript combined to make JSX. Most of this logic should make sense, right? The question is, where does this x.metadatum come from? Well, x is arbitrary. It's just the name I gave to each item that we are mapping from this array called data. All right, I could have called this x anything I want, and that's the reference I would use here and here. So the more interesting question is, okay, where is the data array coming from in the first place? And why am I able to call .metadatum right here? And you'll probably have to watch this part of the video a few times. This is the brand new piece that I want to challenge you to play around with over the next few days, okay? All right, so where is the data array coming from? Well, it was passed as a prop to this component, okay? And where that comes from is this async function right here. Now, get static props is built in to Next.js. Next.js, get static props. So you can read the documentation here about how get static props works and how it differs from get static paths and get server-side props. This will be ongoing work. Okay, it takes a long time to really, really appreciate static versus server-side rendering. All right, but I just want you to have enough knowledge to start playing with it, okay? And I just want you to know that get static props is built into Next. Now notice I'm not even importing this from anywhere, okay? And you can see here's the link that I just showed you. You can go read up on this, okay? All right, so I have to use get static props. I make it async because we are waiting for information. Where are we getting that information from? We're getting it from a Dandelion endpoint. We're accessing the Dandelion endpoint that serves up a Postgres API of dbsync from the mainnet. Okay. We go to this endpoint. When the result comes through, we set the data equal to that result. Okay. And then we return it as data. And that's why, that's the name, right? We're calling this variable data here, we're calling the array data, and that has to match this. So if I were to change the name here, I would then change the name here and here and here. The console.log part is optional. That's unnecessary. That was just for me to look at it under the hood. But if I open up DevTools and I head over to here, let's open up the console here, and I go to where is it? Playground, and then metadata, and then Postgres. You can see it returns this array, right? It prints the data to the console. There they are. There's all the numbers, okay? So I can get rid of that. That's not really necessary, but I had that going when I was debugging it. I guess I just forgot to delete it. Okay, so that's how we get the data. But what data is here in the first place? Let's just copy this link and look at what this gives us. This is it. And this, we've looked at this before, right? I think we've looked at this together.
Yes.
Right. So hopefully this looks a little bit more familiar now. What is at this endpoint? Well, there's an array, square brackets, of objects. And actually, each of those objects is pretty simple. It's just a JSON object with one key value pair. The key is metadatum, and then the value is whatever that metadatum is. So down here, why are we using x.metadatum? Well, we're using this word metadatum because that's the word that's used at this endpoint as the key. And so what this is really saying is, okay, go through the array, and for every element you find in that array, print the value at metadatum. Now, this can be a little confusing actually because it's almost too simple. So now I want to show you a slightly more complicated version of this. And to do that, we're just going to look at one of the links, right? Let's go up here to 101, for example. This is the one I posted yesterday. Let's look at how this dynamic route is built, because there's a bunch of variables in this file. So let's look. So let me go back. So we looked at index.js. Now let's look at the dynamic route. Okay. Not a very long file, not too much here. But let's see here. Okay, so first of all, we've got our imports and we have all the levels up through the directory. We are once again getting props, but this is a little bit different than last time. Do you see that? Right? Whereas in index, I used get static props. Now I'm using another built-in next function called get server side props. And I'm using another built-in function called page context. What does page context do? Well, it looks at the URL and it says, okay, let's set an ID. Well, and this is arbitrary, right? I'm just setting a variable. I could call it whatever I want. I'm choosing to call it ID. And this says, all right, look at the URL, look at the page context and query the thing in that page context called metadata. This word right here has to match the name of the dynamic route right here. Okay, so basically when you say, all right, go to 101, how is this number in the URL referenced? Well, it's referenced by the name of whatever I call this route right here, right? So if I called this hello.js, then the variable would be referred to as hello right here. In any case, once we get to this route, it's basically the URL that's passing us this information. All right, now how is that number used? Well, that number is used for a dynamic fetch. A moment ago, I showed you a static route, right? This is not asking for any specific variable. It's just asking for all of the metadata. But let's look at this query right here. And let's just keep in mind that ID is a variable. So let me paste this here, but I'm going to replace the equals $ square brackets with just the number 101. Ah, and here is just the raw output of metadata at a given key. Now this is being served up by Dandelion, but that's not the only place you can get this, right? Anybody who builds, right? So like the guys who built Blockchain Explorer or Cardano Scan or Stakepool Central, right? They have their own instances of DB Sync running in their own ways for getting that data. Dandelion just makes it accessible to everybody. Okay, so what's inside of this? Well, there are a bunch of objects. How many objects are in this array? Well, we shouldn't be surprised. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 objects. And that's where this number 7 is coming from. So now let's look, right? We grab that data, we then return it, and we're returning both the ID and the data we get this time. And we're passing both of those to the function. Okay, and then when we write the actual JSX right here, metadata key what? Metadata key number, brackets for a variable, number ID. So no matter what, even if the endpoint doesn't exist, watch this. So like the number, let's just do the number 2000, because I don't see a 2000 here. So if I go to the route /2000, the number still shows up here. The number still shows up here because that number is only coming from my URL. Well, how many transactions are there? None. We didn't find any. The most recent one's just blank because there's nothing there. If I go to 2001, Same thing. So I can write whatever number I want, but only at routes where something actually exists will data be printed here and counted here. So, right, then we say data.length. Okay, how many items are there in this array, right? So dot length is just an array function in JavaScript. Anytime I have an array, I can do dot length to count how many things are inside of it. I print the ID number again here. And then all I'm doing, this is the absolute minimum I could do. All I'm doing is using the dot stringify function on the data at the last index, right? And so we know that arrays count from 0. So this is index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So the last item in this array has index 6. So all I did is took the length of the array, subtracted 1, and that gives me the last number, the last index. And that's why I'm able to say the most recent transaction, the most recent metadata looks like this. Just print the JSON here. The most recent one.
Well, why did you have to stringify the JSON? When do you stringify JSON?
When you want to just print raw JSON to an HTML page. Okay, so if I left that part out, I think React would return an error. I have to double check what happens without that, but that's basically what allows me to do this.
Oh, so ideally, a HTML does not support like displaying JSON in its raw format.
I think so. I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's an HTML thing or a React thing, right? But it's at somewhere in the stack, you get an error if you don't take the object and just turn it into a text string that can be handled.
Yeah, it makes sense. Everything is coming together little by little.
Nice. Okay. So your challenge is just to play with this and see if you can get a Dandelion endpoint to render some data on a page. All right. And once you get that working, then next time, let's just post something about ABCD that you can then print to the page just as a proof of concept. Okay.
I should do it on the ABCD repo.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Or, if you don't want to do that yet, if you just want to do some experiments on your own, just do it on a private project first. Okay. But yeah, I think we can have some fun on ABCD. And just like we're doing here at Gimbal Labs, right? Is this really useful to anybody? Not at all, right? This is not doing anything. All it's doing is showing, here's how you play with metadata. Now, with that in mind, I want to show you one more thing. Don't worry about this part, but I just want to have this concept in your mind, okay? So Postgres is one way. There's another Dandelion endpoint with served up via GraphQL, okay? And if I go to 101, it's actually, oh my gosh, this is, look at what a mess this is, right? There's all sorts of stuff here. Oh, and metadata key. Gosh, this isn't even pulling in the right thing. Okay. So actually, it looks like I might have to fix this. But yeah, this is what I wanted you to see. I'm not sure. Error, that's funny. Okay, so there's something wrong here that I might want to fix. I actually don't know why this part isn't working. But
okay, so my understanding is the Postgres provides a more cleaner and readable version of the.
Actually, GraphQL is much better. It's just the reason this is messy is because of what I did, not because of GraphQL. And we're going to talk more about GraphQL over the next few weeks. It really allows you to integrate nicely. The only thing I want to show you here is that what I did is I said, okay, at key 100, I know that there is some special data. Know that at key 100, and here, that's not the best way to see it. Let's look at it here just because it's easier to read. At key 100, there's this really cool data about Project Catalyst and the projects that won it. And each of those projects has a name. Okay. And because these are just JSON objects, obviously it's much more interesting to grab precisely the data you want than just to stringify some raw JSON, like I was showing you in the first example. So don't worry about this part. I just want you to have this in your mind. What I did is I said, okay, at most keys, it's just going to print a whole bunch of whatever data it can find. However, if you go to key 100, something special happens. The logic is different, and I just used an if statement in the JavaScript file. And if we go to key 100, print something special, print a special header, and then just grab the names of those winning proposals. And you can see the names in the same order right here. Create message signing standard. That was the first one. Liquid, second one, and so on down the list. Quickly, how do we do this? This is in Playground Metadata GraphQL. So you can explore this on your own. Playground Metadata GraphQL. I actually put all of this on the index. And you can look around. We're going to talk about the details of this soon. Don't worry about the details too much. Just notice that I can do data dot anything. And so all of these dots, okay, represent drilling down into the actual data. And I am certain this is overwhelming right now, and I'm not trying to overwhelm you. I just want you to have this in your brain, okay? But look, the most important thing is this last piece, dot project name. Let's do this, dot information, dot project name. Those words come directly from the metadata object. Dot information is a key. Inside of information, there's another key called project name. And it's capitalized just like this. So that's what I had to do here. You see the same capitalization. You see the word winners right here. That comes from here, the array of winners. So winners, array index, dot information, dot project name. The point I'm showing you right now is that once you have metadata in JSON form, you can just use, what you know about JSON to target exactly the information you want. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. What questions? Obviously, that last part probably raised some questions, but I think it's really important just to give you this preview of where we're going. Okay.
Okay, Mr. James, but could you kindly send the GitLab link to the group page?
Yeah, you got it. All right, I'm going to put this link in the Discord.
Okay.
Okay, and here it is, just so you have it in the chat as well. So you got access to that now. And yeah, just go play. Go read the code in that playground metadata section and just see if you can get something working. Okay, it doesn't matter what, just start to play. And on Friday, we'll talk about any problems that came up for you, right? If you got stuck anywhere, first we'll troubleshoot. And then if everything is working, then we'll try to be a little bit more specific with what we might try to do with some metadata.
Okay, Mr. James, thank you so much. I'll try it at the ABCD website then.
Cool. Hey, thanks. You're brave. Thanks, Bookie.
Yeah,
All
Mr.
right.
James.
Yeah.
Mr. Josh said you should send the URL for the Zopool website to Holga. I don't know if I pronounced the name right.
Holga, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for today's class.
URL. All right, I'll reach out to Josh about Zoe. Oh,
I
you
think the repo, you are still in charge of the repo.
and I need to hand that off. Okay. Okay, yeah, I would
Okay.
definitely love to hand that off. That's great.
All right, Mr. James.
All right,
Thank
my
you.
friend. I'll see you on Friday.
All right, have a nice day.
You too. Take care. Take care, Juan. Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you, James. This has been a great class. I mean, awesome.
This was fun. Ooh, we're getting into the fun stuff, my friend.
Things are, concepts are getting to the right place.
Good.
So it's really good.
Good. And
Thank you
Faye,
so
if you
much.
watch this whole video, we thank you for sticking with us, and get well soon, and we'll talk to you soon. All right.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.